Hi, I'm sitting here today with Rob Connick, who is the creative director? Artistic director for Laugh Riot. Let's start off with a little bit about you.
Well, I graduated from Edinboro in 2001 with my bachelor's in drama and spent the next couple of years figuring out what exactly you could do in Erie with a bachelor's in drama. So I worked as a taxi cab driver, electrician's assistant, and then wound up working at a drug and alcohol center for delinquent teens. I went up there as far as I could without having to go back to school. And when they said in order to get the next promotion I would need to go back and either get a master's degree or a sociology degree, I figured I might as well just go back and do my master's in theater. So I went to Bowling Green State University and got my master's and PhD in theater, and graduated in 2011 with that. While we were looking around for jobs, nothing was coming up anywhere else, so we decided that it was time just to move back home. And one afternoon, my wife Jessie looked at me and said, well, if we're moving back home, why don't you start the theater that you've always talked about? And we had always mentioned sometime in the future we wanted to start a community theater somewhere. But that was always 10 or 15 years down the road. This just seemed like the perfect time to do it, because now if it worked, great, and if it didn't work, we weren't out anything.
So right. There's a lot of risk involved in that, though. I mean, a lot of, I mean, there seems to be a little bit of a resurgence in Erie, in the area of smaller theaters happening, but, I mean, you need a lot of startup cash, you need a space, how did you feel about getting all those things to happen?
Well, we had originally planned to be looking and generating support for almost an entire year before we even had our first show. We came together in October and we weren't planning our first show until the next September. And then in March of last year, Professor Taylor at Edinboro actually contacted me and asked if we would be interested in being a resident theater at Edinboro University for at least a year to try it out, which meant that we would have a theater space, which was actually a theater space. We wouldn't be taking some other place and trying to make it into a theater. And that was a godsend. It worked out perfectly for us. It gave us a space that I was still familiar with. It gave us the full theater capacity, and without having to pay those startup costs for a space and for utilities, it allowed us to take some risks with the shows that we're doing.
So that's the benefit for you. What is the benefit for the university?
Well, for the students, it gives them the opportunities that in years past they would have to go either down to the Academy Theater in Meadville or to the Barrows Theater in Franklin or up to Erie to work with All in Act, or at one point the Director's Circle, and at one point the Roadhouse. But all of those were at least a 20 to 25 mile trip. Now they've got those extra things that they can do right on campus. And they're not just educational shows. We have the standard that these are product-driven as well as process-driven shows, that the expectations are much different. And so they have 6 shows that they can take part in beyond their normal shows that they do on campus, the normal 4. So students here can be as busy as they want to all year long. It also gets the university a little bit of free publicity, because we're all over the place with what we're trying to do. We've been marketing with other places in Erie. We've been working with WQLN, just recently did an interview with us. So it's getting their word out without them really having to do anything. Because anytime Laugh Riot's mentioned, we very quickly mention how we're Edinboro University's resident theater company.
So with Laugh Riot, what does the name mean?
Well, we were trying to decide what to call it. The thing that jumped out the most about theater is that historically it's done 2 things very well. It's served as a distraction from real life. It gives people the opportunity that no matter what's going on, they can come in and they can laugh and forget about their troubles. It's also been a very powerful tool for social change, and that's where the Riot part comes in. that through doing improv-based theater with migrant workers who couldn't speak or read English, they were able to create a union to fight for good wages for farm workers in California, that in some of the communist states in Europe years ago, they were able to challenge the government through their theater works, especially coding some of it so that it got past censors. So there's always that opportunity that when you're talking about social issues, that theater really can make a difference, and it can bring awareness to things that most of us would like to just kind of hide under the rug somewhere and not talk about.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, we've seen for years and years, I mean, one play will be banned for 5 minutes or 5 years, and then all of a sudden, 10 years down the line, it's considered, this was a starting point before, the rest of society had caught up with it. I mean, you have, things like the Children's Hour, you have things like They're All Hard, and then, you even have, reinterpretations of different pieces, which, can cause that kind of provocative nature. Now, what is your mission statement then?
Our mission is to provide the community with theater that has a topicality to it. We don't want to do a show just to do a show. When we look at our season, we think, why this show in this place at this time? What benefit does it have? What will people walk away thinking about with this show? What types of discussions can they have about this show? And even with our comedies, if there's not something to that they can take away, we don't necessarily think that it fits with us. And there are many, many great theaters in Erie right now. The Erie Playhouse does great musicals. They do great big dramas and big comedies. That's not us. We try and do the things that won't fit in there. The stuff that we do is much more character-driven, with smaller casts, smaller sets, where we really want the audience and actors to interact a little bit more. Director Circle, or All in Act, does some very strong shows as well. But they tend to do more of the standard community theater stuff, which there is a big market for. Which is, again, why we didn't want to come in and try and do that. Why do something that somebody else is doing well? We looked at what we could bring, our movement-based theater pieces, other topical theater issues and contemporary pieces that the other places might not want to touch because they're a hard sell. For instance, we just finished Blackbird by David Harrower, and it's a play all about pedophilia and the after effects of that sexual relationship decades afterwards for both people. That's not an easy sell for a community theater. It's not something that you're going to say, hey, let's market this and get people to come back time and time again, like you can get with Les Mis at the Playhouse, or with the Agatha Christie plays at All in Act. This is definitely one that, if you see it once, that's enough, but it stays with you and it makes you think, and it gives you something to talk about, hopefully for months afterwards, because it raises that issue and it keeps it there.
So you just mentioned some of the works that you've already done with Blackbird. How has the progression, what have you noticed? What are the lessons that you've learned so far in the process?
One of the things that I've noticed and that I'm very happy about is there's an untapped resource pool for actors. Every show that we've done, we've always had more new people audition. And I think that shows that there is that market for theater in the Erie area, that people were looking for stuff to do. The first show that we did was a new devised piece on Prometheus that a friend of mine created at Bowling Green, and we brought it here, and a lot of that was invite into the cast. Some people who had never acted before but mentioned an interest, I contacted and they decided to do it. From there, we had build up and we got a whole new group of people to audition for our next show, It's a Wonderful Lie, which was a dark satirical take on the It's a Wonderful Life trope. And then Blackbird came, and we knew that would be a hard sell, because we're in Edinboro and it goes up in January. So with the weather, no one wants to make that commute from Erie on a daily basis. So we specifically put a small cast there, and the cast that we had was great for it. It also brought 2 established Erie actors out here in Jerry Brace and Jen Highfill, which showed that there are good actors that people know already that are willing to work with us. And I think that's helped immensely. And then when we got to True Love, we only had 1 person that's ever auditioned for us before that was available. And we were still able to fill an 11-person cast.
So with that, going forward, what are some of the things that that you've learned from this that you want to take forward? And I assume that'll be the next season?
Yes, we're working on the next season right now. Some of the things that I've noticed that work really well and that really seem to resonate as far as what sets us apart are our Greek translations. We did Prometheus, which was a very stylized piece. True Love is a riff on the Hippolytus story. So those things are things that we can look at going forward as what I can bring. I'm very heavily influenced by physical acting styles. So I always look for things that aren't necessarily non-realistic, but that can give actors a sense of how important their body is in relation to the script, rather than just getting on stage and debating.
Now, will you continue to be in residency at Edinboro University?
We hope so. We have not got the official word yet. It's a 1-year trial run, so that both sides can see what works, what didn't, and what needs to be improved for next year. But I'm hoping that with the response that we've gotten from the students, that we've gotten from administration that have come to see the show, that we've got from the reviews from Erie, from all of our audiences, that both sides will see that this is working very well for everyone involved.